Hello and welcome to Deep in Pact, a deep dive into Wildbow's most unloved work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Reuben Morehouse.
And we are here to talk about Bonds 1.6, and boy, this chapter really starts out dialed all the way up to 11 on the intensity scale straight away, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just Blake sort of pacing around, and then Rose is just like, man, chill. And then Blake sort of points her at the window, and we sort of get an idea of why he's so on edge, and it's pretty intense.
He pulls back the curtain, and the camera pans to the window and sees just a bunch of creepy others at the fence, staring at him and doing all kinds of weird, creepy shit. And we get these beautiful descriptions of all these different others. And one I quite like is, we'll call her the Faceless Woman, and here's a little description. There was a woman with hair, hat, and coat covering much of her face, but when I did get a glimpse, I saw only vague black smudges where her eyes and mouth should be. She held a cigarette up near her face, but never inhaled from it. The others seemed rather intent on avoiding her, giving her a wide berth as she paced, which I love. Like, she's too other even for the others.
Yeah, well, it just immediately establishes her as scary as fuck, because all the other scary things are avoiding her. Like, she's the John Wick of the local others.
Yeah, she's the boogeyman's boogeyman. So, but basically we get a nice little ticking clock set up because Blake has ordered a pizza and it's going to arrive in 30 minutes or less. But then the others showed up, and now Blake is kind of stressing out that the pizza guy is going to basically get murdered when he shows up.
Yeah, I love this bit where Rose just sort of calls him out, and she's like, because he sort of explains that the pizza is his way of testing whether they can get stuff delivered.
Yeah,
and
which
Rose
makes
is like,
sense.
What? So but Rose is like, wait, so you're just putting some rando like pizza delivery guy in the line of fire? And Blake's like, well, it wasn't there when I did it. And then he like looks out the window again. It's just this real moment of like, oh.
Yeah. So he calls up the pizza place to cancel the order, and the guy on the other end of the phone is clearly acting strange. We're not really sure why. He basically says, no, we're not going to cancel your pizza. Even though you said we can keep the money, we're not going to do it. And Blake says, you're being intentionally dense. And then the other guy just hangs up, and we're not really sure what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, I just sort of assumed that the guy on the other end of the line was somebody who was trying to fuck with Blake somehow and wanted the pizza guy to die. Which is just, it's a bit of an uh-oh moment.
Yeah, so Blake and Rose take a break from worrying about, accidentally murdering the delivery guy to talk about whether they should get a domain, a familiar, or an implement first. The conversation basically boiling down to each of them require you to have an amount of power to get the other one, but you don't have power until you get one of the other ones,
Yeah, well, exactly. It's sort of like to claim a domain, you need to be able to defend it, but to defend it, you really want to have like an implement or a familiar, but to get some of those, to get a decent implement or familiar, you need a source of power, which is usually a domain.
Yeah.
So, I think like Blake calls it a catch-22, and that's basically what it is, and they discuss how it seems like most of the locals, because they come from the families, presumably they were sort of magical trust fund babies, is the great term that they use. But it's just sort of another thing that calls into question this whole, why the hell didn't Rose Sr. prepare any of them in any way? And like, there's going to have to be a reason, because it's so stupid that she didn't. There has to be a reason.
No comment. So Blake and Rose are kind of talking, and they get a bit more info about some of the other local players. So Johannes has in the book managed to claim a huge, in Grandma's like contact book, she writes that he has managed to claim a huge domain without anybody challenging him, which nobody really knows how it's happened, which is a nice little seed for us to explore later.
Yeah, like, because it's sort of this thing where Rose Sr. is sort of like, it's weird that none of us figured it out. And then she also mentions that Mara isn't helping, which was a great little bit of foreshadowing, I assume, because I don't think we've heard the name Mara before, and it's just casually thrown in there. I'm sure that'll probably come back. And then sort of after this, like, Miros brings up her idea again that they should look into protections for witch hunters.
Yeah.
And Blake just kind of rolls his eyes at her, but then he actually gives some pretty good arguments as to like, well, if these are sensible things to do, it's just going to be in the book for practitioners anyway, because the practitioners are probably doing them. So can we just, palm that off later? And then sort of basically says that he'll owe her a compromise in the future. He's making pacts with Miros.
Yeah, very similar to the deal they made with Padrick in the previous chapter.
Yeah,
we will consider a deal with you, which is, I think, the bare minimum that you can offer somebody in exchange for something. I'll consider agreeing to something you say later.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just basically all you're really promising is to actually meet up with them and hear them out, which I guess is something.
So the conversation kind of gets interrupted by the pizza delivery guy showing up, and this
just
is...
as you forget that there's like all these creepy others outside and there's lives on the line. Like I totally got distracted by all this talk of the books, and it was like, oh yeah, shit, that thing.
This is, I think, this whole scene is the part of the book where I was like, shit, man, this book's great, Like, it's been good up to this point, but this is the part where it's excellent. So basically what happens is the pizza guy shows up and he gets attacked, and Blake is standing at the front door, paralyzed, not able to go out to help. And Rose is freaking out. I'll read a little passage. Rose was screaming now, "Damn you, Blake, damn you, God, fuck." She hit the mirror. But Blake says things like, "There's no fucking way I'm going out there." And he just can't get out,
Yeah, which is very un-Blake, because up until now, he's always been the like, Blake rushes in type. So, and like, we sort of learn, like, I didn't quite catch it on my first read through, but it was more apparent when I went back just before this. He the whole time sort of sitting in the back of his mind is the idea that it's only the house that's safe and not the whole property. So it is all a trap to lure him out there. And that's sort of what was on his mind. Yeah. But that's still impressive that he was willing to, sit there. Like, it kind of shows how fucking scared he was of the whole thing, that even with the logic behind it, that his response was just, no, like, I'm staying here.
Yeah, and I like it so much because we don't really understand, like, when you're reading through it, you're not really sure whether Blake is just paralyzed or he's figured something out. It's kind of ambiguous. Yeah. And I think that's not just for us, the audience. I think even Blake is kind of unsure.
Yeah, no, he doesn't seem to have a whole lot of clarity in his head about why he was doing what he was doing. He wasn't sure, so he kind of stayed put. And that hasn't really been his response up until now. So yeah, I thought that was interesting.
There's a quote later on which I think sums it up pretty well, where Rose says, "How sure were you," she asked, "that he wasn't human?" I didn't answer. Rose was staring at me and I avoided her gaze. And it's like...
Yeah, it's a damning silence. Yeah. Well, especially because like, there was nothing in his internal monologue to suggest that he thought in any way, shape or form that that guy wasn't human. He seemed to be under the impression that this guy was dying, but it was still better to wait. And especially, I don't know, I thought there was a whole thing, because in the first chapter, Blake assumed that the bird people were going to turn him into a bird person, and now he's assuming that this guy was always not an other, and he, instead of just my first thought was it was a human who just got so fucked up that he turned into another. Like, I don't know the rules for others yet, so I thought that might be what happened, but yeah, I mean, Blake knows more than I do, I guess, so I don't know, but yeah, Blake's just, he's still sort of making these broad assumptions, I feel like, and just being very sure in them.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of panned out so far, but we'll see, I suppose. Yeah. So Blake calls back the pizza place just to double check that he didn't accidentally kill somebody, which I like. And basically the pizza guy reveals, that he's just pissed off at him and he was fucking with him because the Thorburns haven't sold the house and it's fucking up the value of property in the town.
Yeah, so it's just another thing to remind us that also normal people aren't on Blake's side either.
Yeah. I really like this. I like the idea of, we talked last chapter about how Laird's position as the chief of police kind of has magical portions of it and also just the mundane portion of it, and they're very kind of intertwined. Like his power, his magical power depends on him being good at his actual human job. I just like the idea that the magical world can have these subtle runoff impacts on the real world,
No, and Laird even sort of suggested some stuff along those lines where, he was saying when practitioners fall, it can be like, say, I think the example he used was, some sort of racist mob might attack them or something, and it all comes down to like that plausible deniability. And I guess that's all part of how, there seem to be mirrors in perceptions within the magical world and the real world. So it all kind of lines up, and there's the plausible deniability. Like nobody was shocked when Molly died, because the family's just as hated in the real world as they are in the magical one. Yeah.
Anyway, so Blake kind of decides, you know what, it's time for us to awaken. Let's do this. But before they do that, Blake kind of wants to take another look at the book on demons,
Yeah. And I like this bit just before he goes to grab the book where like they sort of go into the study and Miros just starts getting the awakening ceremony ready for herself as well. Yeah. And because I had the exact same reaction as Blake, like I was like, what are you doing? And she was like, I thought I'd try it too. And as soon as she said that, I was like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. Like, what has she got to lose, I guess?
Yeah, totally.
So I loved that moment because I went through the exact same thought process as Blake and then I started to feel a bit guilty that I hadn't considered that it was probably a good idea for her to do it too.
Yeah, like she, as far as she knows, she was a human up until, 3 days ago or whatever. So why couldn't she awaken, right? Maybe it's wishful thinking, but it does make sense for her to just assume that she could do it.
Yeah, exactly. Or that it's worth trying.
Blake goes to pick up a book about demons, and Rose is like, well, let me just read the quote. Rose says, Blake, you know that moment in the horror movies where you're screaming at the actors, don't go up the stairs, don't touch the glowing skull, don't read the book. It's a good point, Rose,
Yeah, what harm ever came from reading a book?
Yeah.
That's an obscure movie reference there. But she has a good point. And then Blake also has some valid arguments here where he's like, yeah, but like we're so out of our depth.
Yeah.
Can we like, if we just are aware of what the nuclear weapons are, that might make everyone a little bit more nervous about fucking with us.
Yeah, they do both have good points, but eventually Blake concedes and goes to put down the book, but a note and a key fall out from under it. I want to read this quote as well. Blake and Rose are arguing about whether he should read the note. And Blake kind of plays a bit dirty, saying, wax makes a seal, and that seal just broke. That's reaching, Rose said. Okay, maybe, I said, but tell me you can't imagine a drawing of something coming to life and crawling free of that page, which is very manipulative. And then Rose says, yes, I can imagine it. Yes, are you happy? Blake says, I wasn't. I picked up the page, which I think is a hilarious line as well. It's so grim, and you get this real impression of Blake and Rose are just pushing against a waterfall and trying to swim upstream, but it's just so impossible.
Yeah. I mean, Rose is just like, please don't do it, and Blake just kind of feels like he has to, and he's just bullshitting here to kind of be like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And I mean, he gets his way because again, he's the one in control.
Yeah. Again, Blake gets his way. And, maybe chalk it up for another thing that Rose will eventually, get back at him for when they swap back, as you would suggest.
Well, he does actually call out that, when she sort of is like, oh, fine. I think this might actually be from the earlier conversation, but, he's sort of like, there's a potential here that she could just be building up anger, and he sort of blames it on her personality a bit. But I was thinking, well, also the fact that, she can't do anything but it was nice to see him actually clue into the fact that he should keep an eye on whether there's like building resentment on her end.
Yeah. So Blake opens the note and it explains that there's a terrifying demon that is sealed away in the attic named Barbatorum. It's this freaky demon that's really bad, and Rose has been like dealing with it for.
Well, it sounds like it may not even have been her, but like her ancestors.
Totally.
Put it up there.
It's just been this thing that has been there being dealt with, in the sense of making deals with it. Just a little fun note. The note that fell out, once it has been disturbed, Blake tries to like put it on the table, but it keeps coming off. There's just a fun little use of magic to make the note keep disturbing itself, which is a bit of a weird point.
Yeah, well, it's like, at first I was like, what's the point of that? Like, it's so unnecessary, and then I realized it was Rose Senior who would have done it, and it was kind of like, I guess her point is that, they shouldn't just discard the note or whatever, but it's classic Rose Senior, and then it's an overly dickish way to make her point, like, because it's such a pain in the ass to deal with this note. Like
pay attention to this.
Yeah. It's great.
So Blake goes up to check out the demon. He opens the door. It's not there. And that's the end of the chapter.
Well, he thinks it's not there.
He doesn't see it.
I did a bit of Latin in high school, so I'm pretty sure Barbatorum basically just means guy who's a beard or something.
Guy who's what? A beard?
Well, like barber, or
right.
Barb is the Latin word for beard, and then my knowledge of all the tenses and stuff is a little bit rusty, but like, I'm pretty sure this is just like a guy who, like, it could be like a barber or something, like someone who does something to beards is my rough translation of Barbatorum. So the fact that he would be disguised as a pair of shears lines up. So that's my current theory as to what's going on there.
So we should say there's a pair of shears in the attic, kind of stuck in the middle of this summoning circle, seemingly breaking the circle.
Which isn't just a circle, but like a whole bunch of shit. So
a bunch of symbols.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the chapter, 1.6.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We've probably talked about this chapter for the smallest amount of time of any of the episodes so far, but this is definitely my favorite chapter that we've covered so far.
Well, this is the first one where I've been really excited with what it's doing, not what it's preparing. Like, if that makes sense. Like, almost all the other chapters have been laying groundwork, and like, even the one where the first lot where Blake was running away from the Birdmen, we had so little information what was going on. This is sort of, and it's like the end of this first arc, so it kind of makes sense that we're finally getting a bit of delivery on what's been set up. And we're actually starting to do stuff, and that's really fun. Yeah.
I think this. You're right that we had the kind of action scene with the bird skull creatures. We had the brief interactions with the fairies, but this scene with the pizza delivery guy and Blake kind of paralyzed, and then the reveal that these others were banding together to make him think that he could exit the house and be safe is like such a cool set of action bits and moments and cool twists. It really kind of sets up what this story can be, which I really like. So that's us talking about Bonds 1.6, but we've got a little monster corner here. I want to talk about the idea of like faceless women as as a creature, So we highlighted her as the spookiest other from before, but the idea of like faceless women ghosts have been around for a long amount of time. So I want to kind of dive into a bit of the history of these, and we're going to focus on the most common of these, which is the Japanese ghost called the Nopera Bo, which is a woman without a face, basically it boils down to, or with a smudged face. So this has been around since 1904. There was this basically set of paranormal horror short stories written in 1904 by a guy called Lafcadio Hearn in Japan. And this is the first appearance of one of these creatures where a guy is kind of traveling and he comes across a crying woman and he goes to like comfort her, but she turns around and she has no face. And then he goes to, in what I think comes across more comedic than it probably did in the original story, he goes to tell his story to a traveling soba noodle salesman. and he's kind of describing it, and he finds that he can't describe what it looks like. And the salesman said, "Did it look like this?" And he kind of rubs off his face. And this kind of appears in a lot of these stories of the No Parabo. It's like a guy finds a faceless woman who will like wipe off or smudge her face as a twist, and then he'll go and try and describe what it was like to somebody else, a soba noodle salesman or his wife, and then she's also rubbing off her face, you know.
I mean, it sounds kind of suited to the fairies we saw last time in Pact. Like that seems like the sort of mocking, haunting thing they'd sort of do, where there's this moment of like, you know, you're confiding in them, and they're like, oh, like this, and it just turns around. Yeah,
it's so weird. It's like it's a ghost that's perfectly set up to be the twist at the end of a short story. Like, oh, your wife is one of these. So these ghosts, the lore of them is, you know, once they kind of latch onto you, they'll just follow you around and imitate different people in your life to scare you. I'm not really sure what the point is. As a fun little side note, doing research on any kind of ghost on the internet, it's a nightmare, because you get people who take all of these ghost stories so seriously. So actually, to jump into the lighter side, when I was researching this, I found an anime called The Haunted House Secret of the Ghost Ball, which is like a Ben 10 style anime where a girl has this magical wristwatch and she can use it to summon ghosts, to fight other ghosts, basically, or like a Pokemon style thing.
That is,
you know,
very Ben 10. Are you talking about Yokai Watch?
Nope, not Yokai Watch. I guess it's a more common thing than you'd expect. So I watched this. There was an episode where there was a No Parabo, or they called it the No Face Ghost. And at the end of the story, at the end of the episode, they have like a ghost school where they just kind of do an info dump about the ghost. And so they state its powers as ability to steal your face and wear you like a Halloween costume, can change into anybody you know, and hates being exposed to sunlight or mirrors, which seems fairly accurate to the lore from what I saw. Except the idea about sunlight or mirrors. I'm not really sure where that came from. Ghosts appear at night.
Most of the others in Pact seem to be nightbound. And yeah, most ghost story things have, like, daytime is always the safe time. Seems to be a pretty recurring theme in most.
Yeah, I guess every kind of spooky thing hates daylight, you know? So it feels weird to list it as a stat for every single creature. Anyway. So that's a bit of history about this No Parabo. And I guess that's all we have to talk about for today. We did featuring a comment last episode. We'll probably only do one additional like thing every episode, so a monster corner or a look back at some past comments. If there's stuff that you'd like to see, feel free to kind of leave it in the discussion thread and we'll take a look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, we're definitely keen to hear more ideas of cool stuff we can do.
Yeah, totally. So speaking of discussion threads, if you want to find our discussion threads, you can look in the show notes for this episode. You'll find the discussion thread for this episode, as well as a lovely Redditor named Kiakan has started putting together a list of all the discussion threads, so you can jump back and see what people are saying about previous episodes.
Yeah, the show notes also include a link to our website, which has its own links to Twitter and Facebook, so you can, interact with us there. There's all sorts of ways to contact us on that website.
Yep. Also from that website, you can find links to review us on iTunes, which would be very helpful. When's our next episode coming out, Elliot?
So the next episode will be on Friday, which, doing some live math right here.
Is it the 12th? 10th?
That's the 11th.
The 11th, all right. Averaged my two answers there. So Bonds 1.7, the penultimate chapter of the first arc, on the 11th, and we will see you then.
See ya.